Welcome back, dear viewers and coin treasure hunters, to our channel where hidden history meets unbelievable value and everyday pocket change turns into life-changing fortune. Today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about and mysterious stories in the world of rare coins, a story that has captured imaginations, fueled dreams, and sent collectors searching through old jars and inherited collections. Because today we are talking about the legendary 1969 quarter dollar coin that is whispered in collector circles to be worth up to $15 million, not because it is made of gold or because it was officially issued as a special commemorative, but because of a fascinating combination of minting errors, production mistakes, rare circumstances, and extraordinary possibilities that together create the perfect storm of value, intrigue, and scarcity. So settle in and listen closely as we explore how an ordinary-looking quarter from 1969 could, under the rarest conditions, become one of the most valuable coins imaginable, a coin that represents the unpredictable magic of minting history and the reason why people never stop checking their change, because the story of the 1969 quarter is not about just one simple flaw but about a chain of events that could elevate a humble 25-cent piece into a multi-million-dollar legend. Starting with the historical backdrop of 1969 itself, a year filled with change, tension, technological leaps, and massive production demands at the United States Mint, where millions upon millions of coins were being struck to meet circulation needs, and when production volume rises, so does the possibility of mistakes, and those mistakes are exactly where value is born, because collectors do not chase perfection alone, they chase rarity, anomalies, and evidence of human and mechanical error frozen in metal. And the 1969 quarter sits at the intersection of all these factors, first of all being part of the Washington quarter series, which had been in production for decades, meaning dies were often reused, modified, repolished, and sometimes pushed beyond their optimal lifespan, leading to misalignments, doubling, cracks, and subtle abnormalities that most people would never notice, but trained eyes would recognize instantly. And one of the most talked about possibilities with the 1969 quarter is the presence of dramatic double die errors, where the design elements such as the date, the word liberty, or in God we trust appear double due to a misalignment during the die creation process, and while minor doubling is seen on many coins and holds modest value, an extreme double die, especially one involving multiple design elements with strong separation, would be incredibly rare for a quarter of this era, and rarity is the first step on the road to massive valuation, because if only one or two such examples exist, collectors and investors are willing to pay astronomical sums to own a unique piece of mint history. Another layer of intrigue comes from the possibility of off-metal strikes, where a 1969 quarter could have been struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even another metal entirely, such as a silver planchet leftover from earlier years, a foreign planchet, or an experimental alloy, and if such a coin exists, verified and authenticated, it would instantly become one of the most important modern mint errors ever discovered, because by 1969 quarters were officially supposed to be copper-nickel clad, and a deviation from that standard would represent a serious breakdown in mint quality control, and collectors live for those moments where systems fail and history leaves behind a physical trace of that failure. Adding to this is the possibility of wrong planchet thickness or weight errors, where the coin is either too thin, too thick, underweight, or overweight, which could indicate it was struck on an improperly prepared blank, and when combined with other errors like doubling or misalignment, the value multiplies exponentially rather than adding incrementally, because collectors prize compound errors far more than single isolated mistakes. Another powerful factor in the $15 million valuation legend is the idea of mule errors, where dies from two different coin types are mistakenly paired together, creating a hybrid coin that should never exist. And while mules are extremely rare, history has shown they do occur, and a 1969 quarter mule featuring an unexpected reverse or obverse design would be nothing short of extraordinary, especially if it went unnoticed and entered circulation, surviving decades before discovery. And survival is another crucial element, because even the rarest error means little if the coin is damaged, cleaned, or altered, but a pristine, uncirculated example with sharp detail and original surfaces could ignite bidding wars among elite collectors, museums, and private investors, pushing prices into territory that seems unbelievable to the average person, And then there is the controversial and often debated possibility of transitional errors connected to composition changes and experimental minting practices, where the mint may have tested materials, presses, or dyes without public knowledge, leaving behind coins that do not match official records, and when such coins surface, they challenge established narratives and force experts to rewrite parts of mint history, and it is precisely this challenge to what we think we know that drives value so high, because owning such a coin is not just owning metal, it is owning a mystery, a question mark, a piece of history that refuses to fully explain itself, and the 1969 quarters legend grows even further when we consider strike errors like broad strikes, where the collar fails and the coin spreads outward, or rotated dies, where the reverse is misaligned relative to the obverse, or multiple strikes, where the coin is struck more than once in different positions, creating ghostly overlapping images. And while many of these errors exist in lesser forms, an extreme example combined with the right date, mint mark, and condition can transform value dramatically. And speaking of mint marks, the presence or absence of a mint mark on a 1969 quarter adds another layer of complexity, because coins from different mints experience different production pressures, different equipment conditions, and different levels of oversight. Meaning certain errors may be more likely from one facility than another, and if a previously unknown error variety surfaced from a specific mint with only one confirmed example, collectors specializing in that mint would compete fiercely to claim it. And beyond physical errors there is the power of narrative, because the story surrounding a coin often becomes as valuable as the coin itself. And a 1969 quarter discovered in an old family collection, a forgotten safe deposit box, or a roll purchased decades ago adds emotional weight and authenticity that fuels media attention and collector fascination, and when mainstream outlets pick up such a story, values can skyrocket as new buyers enter the market driven by fear of missing out, turning a rare coin into a cultural phenomenon. And this is how figures like $15 million enter the conversation, not as a simple price tag but as the upper limit of what could happen if the right coin appears at the right time with the right combination of rarity, condition, authentication, and public excitement, because at that level the buyer is not just a collector but an investor or institution seeking prestige, uniqueness, and historical significance, and authentication itself plays a crucial role, because for a 1969 quarter to command such an extreme valuation it would need to be examined, certified, and confirmed by multiple top-tier grading services, studied by experts, and possibly even featured in academic publications or museum exhibits, each step adding legitimacy and confidence is what unlocks the highest levels of spending, because no one pays millions for uncertainty unless the potential reward is absolute uniqueness, and uniqueness is the ultimate currency in the rare coin world. And when all these elements converge, extreme errors, pristine condition, documented provenance, expert verification, and a compelling mystery, the result is a coin that transcends its face value so completely that it becomes almost mythic, a symbol of possibility that keeps collectors searching through change jars, estate sales, and old bank rolls, reminding everyone that history does not always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it hides quietly in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to recognize it, and that is why the story of the 1969 quarter continues to captivate and inspire, because even if only one such coin exists or may exist, its legend fuels the imagination and proves that value is not always about gold or size or official recognition, but about mistakes, chance, and the unpredictable human systems that create the objects we use every day, turning a simple quarter into a potential $15 million treasure and transforming ordinary people into dreamers, hunters, and believers in the extraordinary possibilities hidden within the smallest details of our everyday world. Next, 1991 quarter dollar coin. Today we are diving deep into one of the most shocking, mysterious, and conversation-starting stories in modern coin collecting, a story that sounds unbelievable at first but becomes more fascinating the more you listen. Because we are talking about the legendary 1991 quarter dollar coin that has stunned collectors around the world with claims of value soaring as high as $14 million, a coin that many people may have once spent on a soda, dropped into a parking meter, or left forgotten in a drawer, yet today is whispered about in auction rooms, collector forums, and late-night treasure hunting discussions as a once ordinary piece of pocket change that may hide extraordinary secrets. And as we explore this story together from beginning to end, you'll understand why the 1991 P quarter has become a symbol of hope for everyday people who dream that something small and overlooked could turn into life-changing wealth, because this coin's value is not about age alone, not about silver content like older quarters, and not about rarity in the traditional sense, but about a complex web of minting errors, production mistakes, freak accidents, and rare combinations of conditions that transformed a normal clad quarter into a potential multi-million-dollar numismatic unicorn. And to understand why, we first have to step back into the early 1990s, a time when the United States Mint was producing massive quantities of circulating coinage to meet the needs of a growing economy, working at high speed with advanced machinery that was efficient but not immune to error. And the Philadelphia Mint, marked with the famous P Mint mark, was one of the busiest facilities, striking millions upon millions of Washington quarters in 1991 using copper-nickel-clad planchets. Yet amid this ocean of normal coins, a tiny number were born under abnormal circumstances that today fuel legends of extreme value, and one of the most talked about possibilities involves the wrong planchet error, where a quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different composition entirely, such as a silver planchet left over from experimental runs or foreign coin blanks that somehow found their way into the production line, creating a coin that looks like a regular 1991 P quarter at first glance but has the weight, color, and metallic signature of something entirely different. And when such a coin is authenticated, especially if it is unique or one of only a handful known, collectors do not simply see a mistake, they see a once-in-a-lifetime artifact that should not exist, and the rarer the mistake, the higher the value climbs, sometimes exponentially. And this is where the $14 million figure begins to enter the conversation, not as a guaranteed price tag on every 1991 P quarter, but as a theoretical ceiling for an absolutely perfect storm of errors combined in a single specimen. Because beyond wrong planchets there are dramatic double die errors, where the design was impressed onto the die more than once at slightly different angles, creating visible doubling in the lettering, the date, and even Washington's profile. And while minor doubling is relatively common and often worth only a modest premium, extreme hub doubling that affects multiple design elements with clear separation is extraordinarily rare for modern quarters. And when such doubling occurs on a high-grade coin with strong eye appeal, the desirability skyrockets, and collectors begin to imagine what might happen if such a coin were also paired with another major error, such as an off-center strike, where the design is not centered on the planchet, leaving a dramatic crescent of blank metal, or a broad strike, where the collar that normally restrains the coin during striking fails, allowing the metal to spread outward and creating a wider-than-normal quarter with distorted lettering. And then there are clipped planchets, where a portion of the metal blank is missing before the strike, resulting in a curved or straight missing section that tells a story about how the metal strip was cut. And while each of these errors alone can already command impressive prices, sometimes thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, the idea that fuels million-dollar dreams is the possibility of multiple major errors appearing together on a single coin, something that statistically borders on impossible but not entirely beyond the realm of reality, because the minting process involves many stages, and when quality control fails more than once in the same chain of events, truly bizarre coins can emerge. And then we reach one of the most controversial and exciting theories surrounding the 1991 P quarter, the idea of transitional or experimental errors, where dies or planchets intended for future or alternative compositions were accidentally used for regular circulation strikes. And while officially the U.S. Mint did not release silver quarters for circulation in 1991, the Mint has a long history of testing materials, alloys, and processes behind the scenes, and history has shown that experimental pieces sometimes escape into the wild, such as famous transitional cents struck on the wrong metal. And if a 1991 P quarter were proven to be struck on an experimental silver or alternative alloy planchet, especially one never intended for public release, its value would not be measured against ordinary error coins but against legendary rarities. And this is where collectors begin to speak in terms of millions rather than thousands, especially if the coin is unique or one of only 2 or 3 known examples. and authenticity is absolutely critical here, because the difference between a coin worth face value and one worth millions lies in microscopic details, precise weight measurements, metallurgical analysis, and die diagnostics that only top-tier grading services and experts can confirm. Yet the story grows even more dramatic when we consider condition, because a heavily worn error coin, while still valuable, does not command the same reverence as one preserved in near-perfect or mint-state condition, and a 1991 quarter that somehow survived decades without significant wear, perhaps pulled from a mint set, a bankroll, or a sealed bag before entering circulation, becomes exponentially more valuable when combined with a major error, because condition amplifies rarity, and rarity amplifies value. And then there are the legendary strike-through errors, where foreign objects like grease, cloth fibers, metal shavings, or even fragments of other planchets interfere with the strike, leaving ghostly impressions, missing details, or bizarre textures on the coin's surface. And while many strike-throughs are minor, a dramatic and visually stunning example can captivate collectors, especially if it creates a one-of-a-kind appearance that cannot be replicated. And in the realm of high-end numismatics, uniqueness is king, because when two wealthy collectors both want the same singular object, price becomes almost irrelevant, driven more by desire and prestige than by any price guide. And this psychological aspect of collecting is crucial to understanding how a $14 million valuation could even be discussed, because such prices are not set by face value, metal content, or even traditional rarity alone, but by storytelling, provenance, and the human drive to own something no one else can. And imagine a scenario where a 1991 quarter surfaces with documented evidence that it was struck on a wrong planchet, shows extreme double die characteristics, has a dramatic off-center strike, and remains in pristine condition, authenticated and encapsulated by the most respected grading services. With a clear paper trail tracing its discovery and analysis, such a coin would not just be an error, it would be a legend, a headline maker, a centerpiece for museums and elite private collections. And when such a coin goes to auction, especially in a high-profile setting with global attention, bidding wars can escalate beyond rational expectations, fueled by ego, competition, and the desire to make history. And that is how numbers like $14 million enter the discussion, not as everyday realities but as extreme possibilities at the far edge of the numismatic universe. And this is why so many people continue to check their change, search through old jars, and examine inherited collections, because while the odds are astronomically small, they are not zero. And the 1991 quarter represents the modern treasure hunter's dream, a reminder that value can hide in plain sight, shaped by tiny mistakes made in massive industrial processes, mistakes that were never meant to leave the mint but sometimes did, slipping through unnoticed until someone curious enough took a closer look. And even if most 1991 quarters are worth only 25 cents, the story of the one that could be worth millions keeps the hobby alive, inspiring new collectors, sparking debates, and reminding us that history, error, and chance can converge in the most unexpected ways, turning an ordinary coin into an extraordinary artifact. And as you reflect on this story, consider how many objects pass through your hands every day without a second glance, and how many hidden stories they might carry, because the legend of the 1991 quarter is not just about money, it is about curiosity, patience, and the enduring belief that somewhere out there, a small piece of metal holds a secret big enough to change a life. Next, 1967 quarter dollar coin. Today, if you love hidden history, unbelievable discoveries, and the thrilling idea that something ordinary could secretly be worth a fortune, then you are absolutely in the right place, because today we are uncovering one of the most fascinating and talked about legends in modern numismatics. The astonishing story of the 1967 quarter dollar coin that has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and has been linked to staggering values reaching as high as $13 million, a number that sounds almost impossible for a coin many people still remember using to buy a candy bar or make a quick phone call. Yet the deeper we explore this coin, the era it was born in, and the extraordinary errors and mistakes associated with it, the more this story transforms from unbelievable rumor into a powerful example of how rarity, chance, and human error can collide to create something truly priceless. Because the 1967 quarter is not just another old coin. It comes from one of the most unusual periods in United States minting history, a time of massive change, experimentation, and pressure that set the stage for some of the most intriguing mint errors ever imagined. And to understand why this single year has become so important, we must first travel back to the mid-1960s, when the United States was facing a severe coin shortage driven by rising metal prices, hoarding, and public fear that circulating coins would disappear, forcing the U.S. Mint to take drastic measures, including removing silver from dimes and quarters beginning in 1965 and temporarily eliminating mint marks altogether to discourage collecting, which meant that the 1967 quarter, like all quarters from 1965 to 1967, was produced without a mint mark, creating an environment where billions of coins were struck rapidly across multiple facilities with extraordinary pressure to meet demand, and whenever speed, secrecy, and massive output collide, mistakes are almost inevitable, and in the case of the 1967 quarter, some of those mistakes may have been historic, because during this transitional era, silver and clad planchets were both present within mint facilities, experimental alloys were being tested, and dies were being reused far beyond their normal lifespan, increasing the chances of dramatic errors that could slip through unnoticed. And one of the most tantalizing possibilities surrounding the $13 million valuation involves the idea of a 1967 quarter struck on a silver planchet instead of the intended copper-nickel clad planchet, because while silver quarters were officially discontinued after 1964, the mint still handled silver blanks for other purposes, including special issues and experimental testing, and history has proven that transitional errors do occur, as seen with other denominations struck on the wrong metal during major composition changes, and if a genuine 1967 quarter were authenticated as being struck on a silver planchet, especially one matching the composition of earlier silver quarters or an undocumented experimental alloy, it would instantly rank among the rarest modern U.S. coins ever known, because such a coin would represent a forbidden crossover between two eras, a mistake that the mint never intended the public to see. And rarity of that magnitude is the foundation upon which million-dollar valuations are built, but the story does not end with metal composition alone, because die errors during this period are another crucial factor, especially dramatic double die obverse or reverse errors created when dies were improperly hubbed, resulting in clear and bold doubling of inscriptions like the date, the word Liberty, or even Washington's profile, and unlike minor machine doubling that adds little value, true hub doubling produces strong, separated images that can be easily identified under magnification, and given the heavy reuse of dies during the mid-1960s due to cost-cutting measures, the potential for extreme doubling increased, making it possible, though still extraordinarily rare, for a 1967 quarter to display some of the most dramatic doubling ever seen on a modern clad coin, and when collectors imagine such a coin paired with pristine condition, the excitement grows, because condition is a powerful multiplier in numismatics, and a sharply struck, uncirculated example with blazing luster and minimal contact marks would already be desirable, but when that condition is paired with a major error, it pushes the coin into a completely different category, one reserved for legendary pieces that museums and elite collectors dream of owning. And then there are off-center strikes, which occur when the planchet is not properly seated during striking, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and a blank crescent of metal remains. And while many off-center coins are minor and relatively affordable, extreme off-center strikes that still show the full date and a large portion of the design are far rarer and more valuable, especially when the off-centering is dramatic yet visually appealing, and if a 1967 quarter were discovered with an extreme off-center strike combined with another major error, such as double die characteristics or an incorrect planchet, its value would increase exponentially. Because collectors prize coins that tell multiple stories at once, coins that show more than one failure in the minting process, as these represent statistical anomalies that should almost never exist. And another category of error that fuels the $13 million legend is the broad strike, which happens when the collar that normally shapes the coin's edge fails, allowing the metal to spread outward during striking, creating a wider coin with distorted lettering and no reeded edge. And while broad strikes are known, a perfectly preserved, dramatically expanded 1967 quarter with additional errors layered on top would be something truly special. And then there are clipped planchets, which result from mistakes during the cutting of metal blanks, leaving curved or straight missing sections that reveal how the metal strip was fed into the cutting press, and while clipped coins are collected and valued, a large, clean clip combined with another major error would again elevate the coin far beyond typical error pricing, and we cannot forget strike-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, or metal debris interferes with the strike, leaving missing details or unusual textures, and although many strike-throughs are subtle, a dramatic strike-through that creates a unique and instantly recognizable appearance can be highly desirable, especially if it affects major design elements in a visually compelling way, and uniqueness plays a central role here, because in the world of ultra-high-end numismatics, being one of a kind can matter more than any price guide or catalog listing, and this is where psychology enters the picture, because collectors at the top end of the market are not just buying metal, they are buying stories, status, and the thrill of ownership, and if a 1967 quarter surfaced with documented provenance, scientific analysis confirming an undocumented composition, clear evidence of multiple major mint errors, and a level of preservation that defies expectation, it would not merely be a coin, it would be a headline, a sensation, and a centerpiece for any serious collection, and when such pieces come to market, often through private sales or elite auctions, prices can escalate rapidly as wealthy collectors compete not just to own the object, but to make history by setting a new record, and this competitive environment is how values in the millions, and even tens of millions, become possible. And while skeptics rightly point out that not every rumor is reality and that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, numismatic history is filled with examples of coins once thought impossible that later proved to be genuine, reminding us that the minting process, especially during periods of transition and crisis, was far from perfect, and the mid-1960s were exactly such a period, marked by secrecy, experimentation, and unprecedented production pressure. And that is why the 1967 quarter continues to inspire treasure hunters to search through old jars, inherited collections, and bank rolls, because while the odds of finding a $13 million coin are astronomically small, the possibility, however remote, still exists, and that possibility fuels curiosity, learning, and passion for the hobby, encouraging people to look closer, ask questions, and appreciate the hidden complexity behind everyday objects, and even if most 1967 quarters are worth only face value or a small premium, the legend of the one that could be worth millions serves a greater purpose, reminding us that history is full of accidents that become treasures, that value is not always obvious at first glance, and that sometimes, the most extraordinary stories are hiding in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone curious enough to notice them, and as this story continues to circulate and evolve, it keeps the spirit of discovery alive, inspiring both seasoned collectors and newcomers alike to see coins not just as money, but as artifacts of human effort, error, and imagination, each one carrying the potential for a story far greater than its size might suggest. Last 1980 quarter dollar coin. Today, this is the place where ordinary objects turn into extraordinary stories and where pocket change transforms into legends, and today we are exploring one of the most intriguing and widely discussed modern coin stories in the numismatic world, the astonishing tale of the 1980 quarter dollar coin. A coin that at first glance looks just like millions of others struck for everyday use, yet has been surrounded by claims, theories, and documented possibilities that push its potential value as high as $12 million, a number so shocking that it instantly grabs attention and sparks curiosity, because how could a quarter from 1980, a time many people remember vividly, possibly be worth more than luxury homes, rare art, or even gold bars stacked to the ceiling? And the answer lies not in fantasy but in a deep understanding of how coins are made, how mistakes happen, and how rare combinations of errors, conditions, and historical circumstances can turn a common coin into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. And to fully appreciate why the 1980 quarter is at the center of such excitement, we need to step back into the late 1970s and early 1980s, a period when the United States Mint was operating under enormous pressure, producing vast quantities of coinage to support a growing economy while also dealing with rising production costs, changing metal supplies, and aging equipment, and the Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark, was one of The busiest facilities, striking millions of Washington quarters in 1980 using copper-nickel-clad planchets, yet as history has proven time and again, whenever speed, volume, and mechanical processes intersect, errors are inevitable, and while most mistakes are caught and destroyed, a small number escape into circulation, and it is those escaped errors that collectors chase with passion and determination, because each one represents a breakdown in a system designed to be perfect. And among the most exciting possibilities connected to the 1980 D quarter is the wrong planchet error, a scenario in which the quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even a different composition entirely, such as a foreign coin blank or an experimental alloy, and while such errors are rare, they are not unheard of, and when they occur, they instantly elevate a coin's status, because weight, thickness, and metallic composition become tangible evidence that something went terribly and wonderfully wrong, and if an authenticated 1980 D quarter were discovered struck on an undocumented or experimental planchet, especially one not intended for circulation, its rarity would place it in the highest tier of modern U.S. coin errors, a tier where prices are driven not by guides but by private negotiations and competitive auctions. And then there is the powerful allure of double die errors, created when the die itself receives multiple misaligned impressions during the hubbing process, resulting in clear, bold doubling of letters, numbers, and design elements, and while minor doubling is relatively common and often mistaken for true errors, dramatic hub doubling is a different phenomenon entirely, one that produces unmistakable separation visible even without magnification, and if such a double die were present on a 1980 D quarter, particularly one showing strong doubling on the date, the word Liberty, or Washington's facial features, collectors would take immediate notice, especially if the coin were preserved in high mint state condition, because condition plays a crucial role in determining value, and a sharply struck, uncirculated error coin with original luster commands exponentially more attention than a worn example, and when you combine rarity with beauty, desirability multiplies, and then we enter the realm of off-center strikes, which occur when the planchet is not properly seated during the strike, resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and a blank crescent of metal remains visible, and while small off-center strikes are relatively accessible, extreme off-center errors that still retain a full date and a recognizable design are far rarer and far more valuable, especially when the error is visually dramatic and aesthetically pleasing. And if a 1980 D quarter were found with an extreme off-center strike combined with another major error, such as double die characteristics or a wrong planchet, the coin would move from being merely valuable to being legendary, because multiple major errors on a single coin represent statistical anomalies that should almost never occur, yet history shows that they sometimes do. And then there are broad strikes, which happen when the retaining collar fails during striking, allowing the metal to spread outward and creating a wider than normal coin with distorted lettering and no reeded edge, and while broad strikes are known in many series, a perfectly preserved, dramatically expanded 1980 D quarter with additional error features would be an exceptional find, and collectors prize such pieces because they visually demonstrate the physical forces at play during minting, turning the coin into a frozen moment of industrial failure, and clipped planchets add another layer of intrigue, formed when metal blanks are improperly cut from the strip, leaving curved or straight missing sections, and while clipped coins are collected and valued. A large, clean clip combined with another significant error would again elevate the coin into elite territory, and strike-through errors further deepen the mystery, occurring when foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, or metal shavings interfere with the strike, leaving missing details, unusual textures, or ghostly impressions, and although many strike-throughs are subtle, a dramatic and visually unique strike-through can be highly desirable, especially if it affects key design elements in a way that cannot be replicated, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of extreme value, because in the highest levels of numismatics, collectors are not simply buying coins, they are buying singular objects with stories that no other piece can tell, and this is where psychology plays a powerful role, because when two or more wealthy collectors desire the same one-of-a-kind coin, price becomes secondary to prestige, competition, and the desire to own a piece of history, and if an 1980 D quarter surfaced with documented provenance, expert authentication confirming multiple major errors, scientific analysis verifying an unusual or undocumented composition, and a level of preservation that borders on miraculous, it would not just be another error coin, it would be a global sensation, a piece discussed in collector circles, featured in major auctions, and potentially acquired through private sale at a figure that shocks the public, and this is how values like $12 million become conceivable, not as everyday realities, but as extreme outcomes at the outer edge of possibility, driven by rarity, desire, and the human tendency to place enormous value on the unique and the forbidden. And while it is important to approach such stories with healthy skepticism and a demand for proof, numismatic history has repeatedly shown that coins once dismissed as myths later proved genuine, reminding us that the minting process, especially during periods of high production and limited oversight, was far from flawless, and the late 1970s and early 1980s were precisely such a time, and this is why the legend of the 1980 D quarter continues to inspire people to check their change, search old jars, and carefully examine inherited collections, because even if the odds of finding a $12 million coin are incredibly small, the possibility, however remote, keeps curiosity alive and fuels the passion that defines coin collecting. And even if most 1980 D quarters are worth only face value, the story of the one that could be worth millions serves as a reminder that value often hides in plain sight, shaped by mistakes, chance, and history, and that sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest stories, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look a little closer.